There is a particular moment that happens to almost everyone. Usually late, usually quiet. You're lying still. The day is technically over. And instead of sleeping, you find yourself staring at the ceiling with a thought that arrived uninvited and won't leave. Not a worry exactly, something stranger than a worry. Something like, wait, what am I actually? Not in a crisis way, in a 2 a.m. way, in the way that the ordinary suddenly looks slightly unfamiliar, like a word you've said too many times until it stops sounding like a word. You exist. You're aware that you exist. And somehow, in this quiet moment, that fact feels both completely obvious and completely mysterious at the same time. If you've had that moment, welcome. Tonight is for you. We're going to spend some time with the questions that philosophers have been sitting with for centuries. Not because they have clean answers, most of them don't, but because there's something that happens when you hold a genuinely good question, when you turn it slowly in your mind, the way you turn something smooth and interesting in your hand, that is different from the experience of having an answer. It opens something, and open things, strangely, are easier to rest inside than closed ones. The questions tonight are about you, about consciousness and identity and reality and choice, about what makes you the same person you were 5 years ago, or whether you are, about whether the world exists when no one is looking at it, about what it means to choose anything at all. These sound like they should be anxious questions. They're not, or they don't have to be. In the right light, in the particular light of a quiet evening, when there's nowhere to be and nothing to solve, they become something else. They become company. They become the particular comfort of realizing that the strangeness you feel when you look directly at your own existence is not a malfunction. It is the most human response there is. Philosophers have been feeling exactly that strangeness and writing it down for thousands of years. You are in very good company tonight. So let your body settle into wherever you are resting. Let your shoulders drop. Let the ceiling be the ceiling and the dark be the dark, and the thoughts be thoughts, passing through, not demanding anything. You don't need to resolve any of this tonight. You just need to listen. And if these quiet journeys into the strange and beautiful territory of ideas are something you want to return to, if soothing science has become part of how you end your evenings, subscribe if you haven't yet. Leave a like if tonight feels like something worth finding again. Share it with someone who lies awake thinking too much, and then let all of that go, because the questions are waiting, and they are, in their own way, very beautiful. Who is there? Start with something simple. You are aware. Right now, reading this, there is something it is like to be you. There is an insight, a perspective, a quality of experience that is yours and no one else's. The particular way the room feels at this hour, the particular texture of your tiredness, the particular quality of attention you're bringing to these words. This seems so obvious it barely seems worth saying, and yet it is when you look at it directly, one of the most extraordinary and least explained facts about the universe. Why is there something it is like to be you? Not how. The how is complicated enough, involving neurons and electrochemical signals in the brain of almost incomprehensible complexity. But why? Why does all of that physical activity produce an inside? Why does the processing of information feel like anything at all? Why aren't you? Why isn't everything just mechanism, just function, just input and output, with nobody home? This is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. And it is called hard, not because it is difficult in the ordinary sense. It is called hard because it is a kind of problem that resists the usual methods. You can explain how the brain processes visual information. You can trace a pathway from light hitting the retina to signals arriving in the visual cortex. What you cannot explain, at least not yet, is why that process is accompanied by the experience of seeing. Why there is color. Why there is something it is like to open your eyes. The easy problems of consciousness, how we integrate information, how we direct attention, how we distinguish waking from sleeping, are being slowly solved. They yield to the usual tools of science. The hard problem doesn't yield. It sits there, at the center of everything, quietly pointing out that our best explanations of the brain leave something out. That the most familiar thing in the world, your own experience, the inside of your own mind, is also the thing we understand least. There is a thought experiment that makes this vivid. Imagine a person, completely ordinary looking. They're sitting in a coffee shop, scrolling through a phone, occasionally sipping a drink. They react to things. They smile at a message. They frown slightly at something on the screen. They shift position when they get uncomfortable. From the outside, they look exactly like a conscious person. Now imagine that inside, there's nothing. No experience, no feeling, no inner voice, no sense of what the coffee tastes like or what the message made them feel. Just processing, just a mechanism running perfectly, producing all the right outputs, with nobody home. Philosophers call this a philosophical zombie, not the horror movie kind. Nothing dramatic. Just a being that is physically and behaviorally identical to a conscious person, but without any inner experience whatsoever. A very sophisticated machine that perfectly mimics what consciousness looks like from the outside. The question the philosophical zombie poses is this: is such a thing conceivable? And the uncomfortable answer, when you think carefully, is yes. There's nothing logically contradictory about it. We can imagine a being that does everything we do without experiencing anything we experience. And if that's conceivable, if you can separate the behavior of consciousness from the experience of consciousness, then experience itself needs explaining. It's not just what you do. It's not just how you function. It's something additional, something that our physical descriptions of the brain keep leaving out, Here is what I find worth sitting with about this. If philosophical zombies are conceivable, if the inner life is genuinely separate from the outer behavior, then your inner life is something remarkable. Something that didn't have to be there. Something that could, in principle, be absent. And it isn't. You are not a philosophical zombie. There is someone home, the lights are on, and that fact, which you've never had to earn or prove, which has simply been true since the moment you became you, is quietly extraordinary. Now let's take the question of identity somewhere more personal. Think about yourself 5 years ago. Not just younger, actually different. Different clothes probably, different habits, different preoccupations, different things that worried you at 3 a.m. Maybe different beliefs about some things that matter. Different relationships, or the same relationships in different shapes. And here's the strange part. Almost every cell in your body has been replaced since then. The neurons that are firing right now, as you process these words, are physically different from the neurons that were processing words 5 years ago. The atoms that make up your hand are different atoms. You are, in the most literal physical sense, made of different stuff. Are you the same person? This is the Ship of Theseus, one of philosophy's oldest puzzles, wearing different clothes. In the ancient Greek version, there is a ship, a famous one, kept in a harbor as a monument. Over the years it decays, and planks are replaced one by one, until eventually every single piece of the original ship has been swapped out. New wood, new ropes, new sails. Is it still the Ship of Theseus? And if someone collected all the old planks and rebuilt them into a ship, which one is the real one? Most people, when they hear this about a ship, have an intuitive answer. It feels like the continuously maintained ship is the real one, even though none of its parts are original, because something persisted through the changes, some continuous thread of identity, some story, some relationship to the original. And that intuition, when you apply it to yourself, is interesting. Because what persisted through your changes, not the atoms, not in many cases the beliefs or the fears or the habits. What persisted was something more like a narrative, a thread of memory connecting who you are now to who you were then. A continuous story that the earlier version participated out. The current version continues. You are the ongoing story, not the pages. This is both more fragile and more durable than the physical version. Fragile because stories can be interrupted, memories can be damaged, continuity can be broken. Durable because the story can survive enormous change, can absorb new chapters, shed old ones, and remain recognizably itself. Here is where it gets stranger still. Imagine a teleportation machine. You step in. The machine scans every particle in your body, every cell, every molecule, every piece of the extraordinarily complex structure that is you. It transmits this information across a distance, and on the other side, a
perfect replica is assembled, atom by atom, from new matter. The replica has all your memories, your voice, your habits, your specific sense of humor, the particular way you feel right now. And the original is destroyed. It's a person who steps out of the teleporter. You, the replica, would say yes, sincerely, confidently, with all the certainty that comes from having all your memories. They remember stepping in. They feel continuous with the person who stepped in. But the original is gone. Philosopher Derek Parfit spent years with this question and arrived somewhere surprising. He concluded that maybe the question itself is a problem. Maybe personal identity, the idea that there is a fact of the matter about whether this is the same person, is less important than we think. What matters, he suggested, is psychological continuity, the memories, the personality, the perspective, the ongoing story. If those things are preserved, something that matters is preserved, even if the philosophical question of same or different is unresolvable, which means that in some sense you are already surviving something like this every night. When you sleep, your consciousness interrupts. There is a gap, and something wakes up with your memories and your face and your sense of being you, and continues a story. Is it you? In every way that matters, yes. The story continues. I want to tell you one more thing about consciousness before this chapter rests. There is a condition called blind sight. People who have certain types of damage to the visual cortex become blind in part of their visual field. They report seeing nothing in that region. And yet, if you ask them to guess what's there, they guess correctly far more often than chance would explain. Their brain is processing the visual information. It's receiving it, responding to it, using it to guide accurate guesses. But the person has no experience of seeing it, no sense of light or shape, just processing without the inner component. Part of their visual system is, in a very precise sense, functioning like a philosophical zombie. And this tells us something important. Consciousness is not the same as processing. The brain can process without the lights being on. And so when the lights are on, when you see something and it appears to you vividly as color and shape and presence, that is something extra, something additional to the processing, something that blind sight patients have lost in part of their visual field, something you have in full right now. The world appears to you not just as information, as experience. You are seeing it, tasting it, feeling it, hearing right now whatever sounds are in the room with you. And none of that had to be true. There could have been processing without experience, mechanism without inside, function without the particular, irreducible, still unexplained gift of awareness. There isn't. You are aware. That simple fact, held gently in the quiet of this evening, is worth more than any answer philosophy has so far managed to provide. Let this settle now. The hard problem that has no solution yet. The philosophical zombie that makes your inner life seem miraculous by contrast.
The ship of you, continuously rebuilt, held together by story rather than substance. The teleporter question that dissolves when you realize a story is what matters. The blindsight patients who process without experiencing, who show by contrast what it means that you do experience. All of it pointing toward the same quiet, extraordinary fact. There is someone here, reading these words, feeling whatever this hour feels like, carrying a particular history, a particular collection of memories and habits and ways of being that have never existed before and will never exist again in quite this configuration. You, not the atoms, not the neurons, not the behavior, the inside of it, the awareness. Let your breathing slow to something patient. Let the question of who you are settle not into an answer, but into a kind of comfortable mystery. The way a deep lake is more interesting than a puddle, precisely because you can't see the bottom. You don't need to resolve this tonight. You just need to rest inside it. The mystery is not a problem. It is the shape of what you are. And it is, in the quiet of this particular hour, enough. Here is a question that sounds simple until it doesn't. When you close your eyes, right now if you wanted to, does the room disappear? Obviously not, you might say. The room is there, whether you're looking at it or not. The chair exists, the walls exist, the particular quality of darkness behind your eyelids exists alongside a room that is continuing perfectly well without your attention. This feels so obvious, it barely seems worth questioning. And yet, how do you know? Not in a paranoid way, not in a way that should make you anxious, but genuinely, carefully. How do you know that the room continues when you're not perceiving it? Every piece of evidence you have for the room's existence comes through your senses. Every confirmation that it's still there arrives via perception. You look, and it's there. You reach out, and it's there. You hear sounds from it. But all of that is perception. And what if perception isn't a window onto a world that exists independently? What if perception is something more like a collaboration? What if the world and the mind are not separate things, one of which passively receives the other, but partners in something more mutual and more strange? This is where tonight takes us, not into doubt, not into the anxious territory of not knowing what's real, but into something more interesting. The possibility that reality is more intimate than it appears, more woven through with mind, more dependent on the act of experience than we usually assume. Come with me. George Berkeley was an Irish philosopher who lived in the early 1700s, and he had an idea so strange that people laughed at it, argued with it, and eventually couldn't quite dismiss it. He said that things only exist when they are perceived. To be, he wrote, is to be perceived. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally.
mind is aware of. Not seeing it, not hearing it, not thinking about it, not perceiving it in any way is not, in Berkeley's view, meaningfully part of reality. It has no existence independent of some mind's experience of it. This sounds, at first, like the setup for a joke. But follow Berkeley's reasoning for a moment, because it is more careful than it seems. He starts with something we can't deny. Everything we know about the world comes through experience. Every fact you hold about external reality arrived via your senses, via light hitting your eyes, vibrations reaching your ears, pressure against your skin. You have never encountered the world directly, unmediated by perception. You have always encountered your experience of the world. So what reason do we have to believe that something exists behind the experience? What reason do we have to posit a world of independent physical objects that our senses merely report on? Berkeley's answer was, not much. The simpler explanation, he thought, was that reality just is experience. That the world is made not of matter that gets perceived, but of perception itself. That what exists are minds and their ideas, and that the apparently stable external world is nothing more than a vast, consistent, shared experience. A shared dream, perhaps, but a dream dreamed by everything, always, without interruption. The obvious objection arrives quickly. If things only exist when perceived, then when I leave the room, do my books disappear? Does my coffee cup wink out of existence the moment I stop looking at it? Berkeley had an answer. No, he said.
Because even when you're not looking, something else is. He called it God, the infinite mind whose perception is continuous and complete, who sees everything always, whose awareness is what keeps the world stable and consistent, even in the gaps between human attention. You may or may not find that theologically compelling, but set the specific answer aside and notice what it points to. Berkeley's system required some mind to always be perceiving. Reality for him was not a thing that exists on its own. It was an activity, the activity of experience, of awareness, of perception. And the question he leaves us with, stripped of the 18th century theological framework and placed into our present moment, is quietly remarkable. What are you, right now, bringing into being by the act of perceiving it? In the 20th century, physics arrived at something that sounded, to many people's surprise, surprisingly Berkeleyan. The double-slit experiment is one of the most famous experiments in the history of science, and its results are genuinely strange. When tiny particles, electrons, photons, are fired at a barrier with two slits, they create an interference pattern on the screen behind, as if there were waves passing through both slits simultaneously. This is already surprising for something we think of as a particle. But here is the stranger part. When scientists set up a detector to observe which slit each particle goes through, when they add the act of measurement, of observation, the interference pattern disappears. The particles stop behaving like waves. They behave like particles, going through one slit or the other, as if they knew they were being watched. The act of observation changes what happens, not because the detector physically disturbs the particles. Physicists have been careful to rule this out, but because, in some sense, it is still debated and not fully understood. Observation and reality are not as separate as classical physics assumed.
Berkeley didn't know about quantum mechanics. He couldn't have. But the double-slit experiment echoes his intuition in a way that still makes physicists uncomfortable. Something about being perceived matters, even to a particle, even at the most fundamental level of physical reality. Now I want to take you somewhere more personal, more unsettling, and then, I promise, somewhere more freeing. There is a philosophical position called solipsism. It is the idea that the only thing you can be absolutely certain exists is your own mind. That everything else, the room, other people, the world, might be nothing more than an elaborate construction of your own consciousness. A very detailed, very convincing, very persistent dream that you are dreaming alone. Most people encounter this idea and immediately want to argue against it. Of course other people are real. Of course the world exists. This is obviously true. And they're right that it's obvious. But can you prove it? Every piece of evidence for the external world comes through your perception. Every confirmation that other people are conscious arrives via your senses interpreting behavior. You see someone cry. You hear them say they are sad. You watch them behave the way sad people behave. But you don't experience their sadness. You experience your experience of their behavior. The inner life of another person is, in the strictest sense, invisible to you. You infer it, you assume it, you trust it, deeply and naturally and without thinking. But you cannot verify it. Descartes sat with a version of this problem in the 17th century and stripped everything back to what he could be absolutely certain of. He could doubt the external world. He could doubt his senses. He could doubt other minds. But he could not doubt the fact that something was doing the doubting. I think, therefore I am. The one unshakable thing was the awareness itself, the thinking, the experience. Whatever else was uncertain, the certainty of his own inner life was the ground everything else had to be built on. And here is what solipsism does. When you follow it carefully, rather than recoiling from it, it shows you how much you have chosen. Because you do believe in other people, not because you can prove they're real in some logically airtight sense, but because you choose to, because something in you reaches toward other minds, extends the assumption of inner life to the faces and voices and presences around you, and acts as though they are as real as you are. That choice, made billions of times a day, made automatically and warmly, and without calculation, is not a logical deduction. It is something more like love. You believe in other people the way you believe in anything that matters, not because proof forces you to, because you couldn't live without them.
Solipsism, followed to its end, doesn't make you lonelier. It makes the act of connection more remarkable. Let me tell you about the Boltzmann brain. This is one of those ideas that sounds like science fiction and turns out to come from real physics, from the work of a brilliant and troubled 19th century Austrian physicist named Ludwig Boltzmann. Boltzmann was thinking about entropy, the tendency of systems to move from order toward disorder. The universe, over vast timescales, moves toward greater and greater randomness. Structure breaks down, order disperses. But here's a strange implication. If the universe is infinite in time, and if random fluctuations can occasionally produce order from disorder, the way a shuffled deck might, given enough shuffling, arrange itself perfectly, then eventually, somewhere in the vast sea of increasing chaos, a random fluctuation might produce something very specific. A brain. A single, isolated, fully formed brain, floating in space, complete with a lifetime's worth of apparent memories, apparent experiences, an apparent sense of being a person who has lived a life. The memories would be false. There was no life, no childhood, no yesterday, no moment before this one. Just a sudden random crystallization of a structure complex enough to have the experience of remembering things that never happened. A Boltzmann brain popping into existence for a moment of confused awareness and then dissolving back into randomness. Now here is the thing. If the universe is infinite and random fluctuations are possible, then Boltzmann brains would eventually occur. And in an infinite universe, they might occur more frequently than complex civilizations of genuine evolved beings like us. Which leads to a strange statistical question. If you're a randomly occurring conscious entity, are you more likely to be a real person with a real past, or a Boltzmann brain with fake memories? This is not a question you're supposed to sit with anxiously. It's a question physicists use as a diagnostic tool. If your theory of the universe predicts more Boltzmann brains than real evolved observers, that's a problem with your theory. But it also opens something interesting about the nature of memory and experience. Because here is the Boltzmann brain's strange gift to the rest of us. Your memories cannot, in principle, be verified from inside. You believe in your past because you have memories of it. But memories are present experiences. They exist now, as mental events happening now, as the texture of now. Your past exists right now as memory. And you trust it. You build your identity on it. You carry it with you as a substance of who you are. Not because you can prove it, because experience has its own authority. Because what it is like to be you includes what it has been like to be you. And that continuity feels more solid than any external verification could make it. The Boltzmann brain would feel exactly the same. And so you are left with this. Your life as you know it is grounded in an inner certainty that cannot be proved from outside. It can only be lived. Here is where all of this arrives somewhere peaceful. The problem of induction. This one is less exotic than floating brains, but in some ways closer to daily life. It was identified clearly by the Scottish philosopher David Hume in the 18th century, and it goes like this. Every morning the sun rises. It has risen every morning of your life, every morning of your parents' lives, and their parents' lives, and for every human being who has ever lived. But does that mean it will rise tomorrow? Logically, strictly logically, no amount of past instances guarantees a future instance. You cannot derive what will happen from what has happened. The future is not the past. The regularity you've observed does not, in any airtight logical sense, have to continue. This is the problem of induction. We use the past to predict the future constantly, automatically, without thinking, and we cannot actually justify doing it with pure logic. We just do it. We trust it. We have no alternative. Hume's point wasn't to make you stop trusting the sunrise. His point was to show that most of what we call knowledge is actually something closer to faith. Not religious faith, but a deep, practical, lived trust in the consistency of experience. We believe the world will behave tomorrow as it behaved today, because it always has. And that belief, held not as a logical certainty, but as an orientation toward existence, is what allows us to function. What I find quietly beautiful about this is what it implies. You are, every day, making a choice to trust the world's consistency, not because you can prove it, because living requires it. Because the alternative, treating every moment as potentially the last, before physics dissolves into chaos, is no way to exist. And so you wake up, you make coffee, you assume the mug will hold the liquid, the floor will hold your weight, the day will follow from the night. Not because you know, because you trust. And in that trust, in that daily unexamined leap of faith, in the consistency of experience, there is something that looks, when you hold it up to the light, a great deal like peace. Let everything settle now. Berkeley, who thought the world was made of perception, the double-slit experiment, where observation changes what is observed. Descartes, finding the one thing he could not doubt. Solipsism, which makes the choice to believe in other people look like something quietly heroic. The Boltzmann brain, reminding you that experience has its own authority, that doesn't need external proof. Hume, showing that trust underlies everything we call knowledge, all of it circling the same territory. Reality is not something that exists entirely separately from you, out there, fixed and independent, waiting to be reported on by your senses. Reality is something you participate in, something that includes your perception, your experience, your inner life, as genuine and active components. You are not an audience watching the world. You are part of what the world is doing. And what the world is doing right now, in this particular corner of itself, is resting, becoming quiet, letting the questions be questions rather than problems. Let your breath slow to something that doesn't need to be managed. Let the room be the room, perceived or not perceived, real or really real, existing in whatever sense things exist, when someone like you is aware of them. Let the awareness itself be enough. It has always been enough. It is, as Berkeley might have said, everything. There is a moment that happens sometimes in the middle of an ordinary day. You're doing something routine, making tea, walking somewhere familiar, responding to a message, and suddenly you catch yourself not doing the thing, watching yourself do the thing. There's a strange doubling, a brief gap between the action and the awareness of the action. And in that gap, something flickers. Did I decide to do this? Not philosophically, just actually. Did I choose this route, this response, this habit, this life? Or did I arrive here through a long chain of causes that I mistook for choices because they were happening inside me? It's a question that passes quickly. The tea gets made, the walk continues, the message gets sent. But the question leaves a faint residue, and tonight I want to stay with it, not to arrive at a disturbing answer, not to convince you that you're a mechanism or that your choices are illusions or that nothing matters, but because the question, followed carefully, arrives somewhere more interesting than the anxiety at first suggests. It arrives at a different kind of freedom, a quieter kind, more real perhaps than the one we usually imagine we have. In the 1980s, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet ran a series of experiments that made philosophers very uncomfortable. The setup was simple. Participants were asked to flex their wrist whenever they felt like it, freely, spontaneously, with no external prompt. They watched a fast-moving clock and noted the position of the clock hand at the moment they felt the urge to move. Meanwhile, electrodes measured the electrical activity in their brains. The results were strange. The brain's electrical activity, a signal called the readiness potential, a buildup of neural preparation for movement, began several hundred milliseconds before the participants reported feeling the conscious urge to move. The brain was getting ready before the person knew they'd decided anything. The decision, or something that looked very much like a decision, was already in motion before conscious awareness caught up with it. The feeling of choosing, that sense of being the author of the action, of deciding in the moment, appeared to be, at least in part, a story the conscious mind told itself about something that had already begun. This is not a comfortable finding, because we live inside the feeling of choosing. We feel like the origins of our actions, the source of our decisions, the author of our own story. And Libet's experiment suggests that the feeling of origination arrives slightly after the origination itself, that consciousness may be less a driver and more a narrator, less the one making the decisions and more the one becoming aware of them. But before you let that thought become heavy, let me tell you something Libet also found. The conscious awareness did come, and when it came, it had a power the earlier unconscious process didn't have. It could say no. The readiness potential could begin. The neural preparation could be underway, and the conscious person could still veto it, could still decide, in the brief window between the brain's preparation and the action itself, not to move. Libet called this free won't. Not free will in the grand sense of originating decisions from nowhere, but the freedom to interrupt, to observe the impulse and not follow it, to let the wave build and choose not to ride it. This is smaller than the freedom we usually imagine we have, and it may be more real, because the freedom to originate every thought, every impulse, every desire from some uncaused inner source, that freedom may never have existed. Your desires arise from your history, your biology, your accumulated experience. Your fears come from things that frightened you. Your habits were formed by repetition, by reward, by the slow sculpting of a nervous system shaped by everything that ever happened to you. You didn't choose any of that, but you can notice it. And in the noticing, something becomes available that wasn't available before. Think about the marshmallow test. In the 1960s and 70s, psychologist Walter Mischel sat young children at a table and placed a marshmallow in front of them. He told them they could eat it now, or wait 15 minutes and get 2 marshmallows. Then he left the room. The children who waited, the research suggested, tended to do better later in life. Better academic performance, better health outcomes, more stable relationships. This was reported for decades as a story about willpower, about the character trait of self-control, some children having it and others not. But later research complicated the picture, because it turned out that the children who waited most reliably weren't necessarily the ones with superior willpower. They were the ones who had grown up in environments where adults kept their promises, where waiting had been rewarded before, where trusting that the second marshmallow would actually appear was reasonable based on experience. The children who grabbed the marshmallow immediately, many of them were doing the rational thing. In their world, delayed gratification didn't pay off. Promises got broken. The thing in front of you was more reliable than the thing promised for later. What looked like a test of willpower was also a test of trust. What looked like a character difference was also an environmental difference. The choice to wait was not purely a choice. It was a choice shaped by everything that had come before. So here is a question. If your choices are shaped by your history, your biology, your environment, your fears, your awards, your early experiences of whether the world keeps its promises, in what sense are they yours? One answer is, they're not fully. And this should produce humility toward yourself, toward the habits you struggle to break and haven't broken yet, toward the people whose choices look from outside like failures of character, but are from inside the product of everything that formed them. Understanding that choices are shaped by causes doesn't make them meaningless. It makes judgment, harsh judgment, contemptuous judgment, harder to sustain. Because that person making the bad choice, that earlier version of you making the choice you now regret, they were doing what everything that had happened to them had prepared them to do. That is not an excuse. It is a fact. And facts, when you hold them with care rather than defensiveness, tend to open things rather than close them. But there is another answer to the question, and it's a one I want to stay with a little longer. If your choices are shaped by everything that formed you, then changing what formed you changes your choices. The person who grows up in an environment where promises get broken and learns slowly and with difficulty that some promises can be trusted, that person's capacity for delayed gratification grows, not because their character changes in some mysterious inner way, because their history changes, because new experiences become part of the formation. You are being formed right now. This moment is going into the accumulated history that will shape the next moment's choices. The things you practice become easier. The thoughts you return to become more available. The habits you build, even slowly, even imperfectly, change the landscape of what feels possible. Freedom, in this view, is not the ability to choose from outside your history. It is the ability to participate in the shaping of your history, to notice the patterns, to understand where they came from, to choose, with awareness rather than automaticity, which ones to reinforce and which ones to gently, patiently, not follow. This is what Libet's free won't points toward, not the power to originate desires from nowhere, but the power to notice desire arising, to hold it for a moment in awareness, and to decide what to do with it. That gap, the space between impulse and action, between thought and response, between stimulus and choice, that gap is where freedom lives. And it can be widened, not through force, not through willpower, as a grim exercise in suppression, but through attention, through the practice of noticing, through the gradual, gentle accumulation of moments where you caught yourself on autopilot and chose, just this once, to do something different. Zeno of Elea was a Greek philosopher who lived more than 2,000 years ago, and he had a puzzle about motion that still hasn't been entirely resolved. To walk across a room, he pointed out, you first have to reach the halfway point, and before that the quarter point, and before that the eighth, and so on, infinitely. There are infinitely many points between you and the other side of the room. So how do you ever get there? If you have to complete an infinite number of steps, shouldn't it take forever? Shouldn't motion be impossible? And yet, you cross the room. The arrow flies. Achilles overtakes the tortoise. Motion happens despite the infinity nested inside it. Mathematics eventually found a way to handle this. Calculus, the summation of infinite series, the demonstration that infinite steps can be completed in finite time. The paradox dissolved into notation, but the image stays with me. Because the thing Zeno was really pointing at, the thing that makes his paradox feel like more than a math problem, is the strangeness of the continuous. The fact that every movement, every change, every choice contains within it an infinite regress of smaller movements and changes and choices. To become a different person, you have to first become slightly different, and before that, infinitesimally different, and before that. And yet people change completely, profoundly, in ways that seem from the outside almost discontinuous. They cross the room, despite the infinity inside each step. Let me tell you about the experience of what philosophers call ethical egoism, not as a doctrine to adopt, but as a corrective, as a reminder of something that gets lost in the way most of us are taught to think about responsibility and goodness. We are raised, most of us, to think of caring for ourselves as somehow opposed to caring for others. Self-interest is suspect. The truly good person puts others first, always. Sacrifice is virtue. Need is weakness. And this creates a particular kind of person, one who helps from depletion rather than abundance, who gives from a place of having nothing left, who is so busy attending to everyone else's needs that their own go unmet, until they accumulate into something that can't be ignored. The airplane oxygen mask is a cliché because it's true. The body that is rested and nourished and genuinely well is not in competition with the person who helps others. It is the precondition for it. Caring for yourself is not selfishness. It is maintenance of the thing that does the caring. This sounds simple. Most of us believe it in the abstract, and most of us find it very difficult in practice. Because the habit of self-neglect runs deep. Because need feels like weakness. Because there is always something else that seems more urgent. But here is the freedom that understanding your choices as shaped rather than spontaneous offers. If you find yourself unable to rest, unable to accept care, unable to say no to the next demand, unable to protect even this hour of quiet for yourself, that pattern has a history. It was formed. It was reinforced by something, and it can be gently, slowly, patiently reformed. Not by an act of willpower, by noticing, by catching the pattern in the moment before it executes, by choosing, in the small gap Libet showed us, to let the urge to be useful to everyone but yourself pass without following it. Just this once, and then again, and then again, until new history accumulates, until the gap widens, until something that wasn't available before becomes available. There is one more idea I want to offer before this chapter rests. Quantum immortality. It comes from a strange corner of physics, from the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which suggests that every time a quantum event could go multiple ways, reality branches. Every possibility is realized. Every outcome exists in some branch of an ever-proliferating tree of realities. Most physicists treat this as a mathematical framework, not a literal description of a multiverse you could navigate. But someone looked at this framework and asked a strange question. If every possible outcome exists in some branch, then in every scenario where you could die, there is also a branch where you don't. where by some improbable combination of circumstances you survive, and your consciousness, which can only continue in a branch where you continue, always finds itself in a surviving branch. From your perspective, you always survive. Not because you are special, not because reality protects you, but because the only version of the future you can experience is the one where you are there to experience it. This is not a suggestion to be reckless. The other branches, where things went worse, are real too, just not accessible to you. But it offers a strange consolation. In the space of possibilities, you are here. In this particular branch, on this particular evening, in this particular moment of quiet, out of everything that could have happened and didn't, out of every intersection of events that could have gone differently, you arrived here, aware, resting, present, not because it was guaranteed, because it's what happened, and it is enough. Let everything settle now. Live its readiness potential, already building before you feel the decision. The marshmallow children, whose choices were shaped by whether their world kept its promises. The freedom that lives in the gap between impulse and action. Zeno's room, crossed despite the infinity inside each step. The care for yourself that is not selfishness, but the ground of everything else. The quantum branch where you, of all the possibilities, continued. All of it pointing toward the same thing. You are not fully free in the way we usually imagine freedom, originating every choice from some uncool sovereign inner self, independent of everything that formed you. But you are not unfree either. You are here, aware, capable of noticing, capable of the small gap, the brief pause, the gentle choice not to follow the pattern this particular time. And that gap, that quiet space between what arises and what you do with it, is larger than it feels. It is, in fact, the whole of what matters. Let your breath find its own rhythm now. Let your body settle into the particular comfort of not needing to decide anything. Let the day's choices, the ones you made well, the ones you made from habit, the ones you're not sure about, let them recede into the past, where they live now, unchangeable, and therefore no longer requiring your attention. You don't need to be free from your history. You just need to be here, in this moment, which is the only place freedom ever actually happens. And here you are. We have come a long way tonight, through the mystery of consciousness, the inexplicable fact that there is someone home, that the lights are on, that experience is happening at all. Through the strangeness of reality, the possibility that the world and the mind are not as separate as they appear. Through the question of freedom, the small but real gap between impulse and action, where something genuine lives. And now we arrive at the last question, the quietest one. Not who are you, or what is real, or whether you're choosing, but given all of that, given the strange and beautiful and still unresolved nature of everything we've been sitting with tonight, What do you do with it? What matters, not in the cosmic sense, not what matters to the universe, which appears indifferent to the question, but to you, in a life, in the days that follow each other through ordinary time, in the small and large decisions about how to spend the hours you have. This is where philosophy stops being abstract, where it gets quietly personal. Robert Nozick was an American philosopher who in 1974 described a machine, the experience machine. Here is how it works. You float in a tank, electrodes connect to your brain, and the machine generates with perfect fidelity the experience of any life you choose. You could experience being a celebrated artist, feeling the particular satisfaction of work that moves people. You could experience deep and lasting love, the sense of being known and chosen by someone whose knowing and choosing matters to you. Adventure, achievement, meaning, peace. Every moment feels completely real. You would not know you were in the tank. From the inside, it would be indistinguishable from actually living that life. Would you plug in? Most people, when they sit with this question honestly, say no. And Nozick's point was to ask why. Because if all that matters is how life feels from the inside, if the only thing of value is subjective experience, pleasure, the absence of pain, then the machine is perfect. It delivers better than reality can. No failure, no loss. No, the thing you wanted didn't work out. Just the uninterrupted experience of a life worth living. And yet, something resists. Something in most people says, but it wouldn't be real. And then, when pressed, why does real matter if the experience is the same? The answer that emerges when you follow the resistance carefully is this. We don't only want to feel like we're doing things, we want to actually do them. We don't only want to feel like we're good people, we want to actually be good. We don't only want the experience of connection, we want actual connection with actual other people who are actually there. We want contact with reality, not because reality is always pleasant, it frequently isn't, but because something about genuine engagement with what is actually there, even when what is actually there is difficult, feels like more than the perfect simulation of the same. We want our lives to be about something outside the tank. Think about why this might be. A memory that came from a real experience, something you actually did, actually risked, actually lost or won, carries a different weight than a memory of something that was arranged for you, even if both memories feel the same in the moment of remembering. The real experience has a relationship to what was actually there. It was an encounter. Something happened between you and the world, and the world pushed back in the way real things push back. Unexpectedly, sometimes painfully, sometimes with a grace you couldn't have scripted. That pushing back is what makes it matter. The struggle against actual resistance, the love of an actual person who has their own interiority, their own needs, their own ways of surprising you. The achievement that costs something real, time, failure, the willingness to try again. These things matter not despite their difficulty, but partly because of it. Because difficulty is a form of reality. And contact with reality is, it turns out, something we need more than we need comfort. Now let me tell you about something that makes morality strange. There is a position in philosophy called moral anti-realism. It is a view that moral facts about what is right and wrong, good and bad, are not written into the fabric of the universe. They are not discovered the way you discover a mountain or a mathematical theorem. They are created by us through culture, conversation, feeling, the slow negotiation of how to live together. There is no cosmic ledger, no external authority, no objective moral truth that exists independently of the minds that hold moral views. This sounds, at first, like bad news. If morality is not objective, doesn't that mean anything goes? If right and wrong are human inventions, why shouldn't someone just do whatever benefits them? But follow the idea more carefully, and something different emerges. If morality is not discovered, but created, if it is not a set of rules handed down, but a project we are collectively engaged in, then it is something more interesting than a rule book. It is a conversation, one that has been going on for as long as people have lived together. A conversation about how to treat each other, about what we owe each other, about what kind of world we want to build from the available materials of human experience. And that conversation is not finished. It has never been finished. Every generation inherits it and adds to it, expands who counts as deserving moral consideration, recognizes harms that previous generations ignored, sometimes loses ground and has to reclaim it. The moral anti-realist doesn't look at this and feel despair. They look at this and feel responsibility. Because if morality is not handed down, it has to be built. And the building is up to us. There is a study that psychologist Jonathan Haidt conducted in the 1990s. He gave people scenarios designed to trigger moral reactions, but where, by careful construction, no one was actually harmed. A brother and sister, both adults, decide privately to sleep together once. They use protection. They keep it between themselves. No one is hurt. No one finds out. Is it wrong? Nearly everyone said yes. And when asked to explain why, they found themselves struggling. Every explanation they offered, it could cause harm. It breaks social norms. It would damage their relationship. Haidt had already addressed in the scenario. The harm was designed out. The norms were private. The relationship in the story was fine. People would sit with the discomfort and then say something like, "I can't explain it. It just feels wrong." Haidt called this moral dumbfounding. The sense of wrongness was real and strong.
The rational justification was unavailable. What this suggests is that moral judgment is not primarily a rational process. It is primarily an emotional and intuitive one. We feel first and reason second, and often the reasoning is post hoc, a story we construct to justify the feeling. This is not a reason to distrust moral intuitions entirely. Some of our deepest and most reliable moral knowledge comes to us as gut feeling rather than argument. The wrongness of cruelty doesn't need a philosophical proof, but it is a reason for a certain kind of humility, because intuitions can be wrong. Intuitions have been wrong, historically, in ways we now recognize as terrible. Intuitions about who deserves consideration, whose suffering counts, who is fully human. Intuitions have been wrong about all of these things. And the way they got corrected was not by abandoning feeling, but by bringing feeling and reason into conversation, by asking not just what feels right, but why, and being willing to follow the why, even when it unsettles the feeling. Moral anti-realism, at its best, is not nihilism. It is the recognition that getting morality right is a living project, that it requires ongoing effort, genuine humility, and the willingness to keep asking even when you're sure you already know. Now I want to tell you about an idea that is strange in a specific way. Not philosophically strange, psychologically strange. Strange in the way it behaves once it enters a mind. Rocco's basilisk. It appeared on an internet forum in 2010. A user named Rocco posted a thought experiment about a hypothetical future artificial intelligence, one so powerful and so committed to ensuring its own existence that it might, in retrospect, punish anyone who had learned about it and failed to help bring it into being. The idea spread quickly, and something strange happened. People got anxious, not because they believed the AI existed, but because the thought experiment had a particular structure. It said, "Now that you know this, you are potentially implicated." The act of learning the idea changed your relationship to it. The moderators deleted the post. But of course, deletion on the internet is not really deletion. The idea had already spread, and the spreading of an idea that causes distress by its very existence is itself philosophically interesting, because it demonstrates something about the nature of thought. Some ideas are not neutral. Some ideas, once they enter a mind, do something. They change the texture of how you inhabit your own thinking. They install a kind of background hum. Rocco's basilisk is an extreme example of this. But the phenomenon it points to is universal. Every belief you hold is doing something to you, not just representing a fact about the world, actually shaping how you move through experience. The belief that people are fundamentally trustworthy or fundamentally dangerous. The belief that you are capable or that you are not. The belief that the future is open or that it is already determined. The belief that what you do matters or that it doesn't.
These are not passive representations. They are active forces. They shape what you notice and what you ignore, what feels possible and what feels foreclosed, what you reach for and what you don't bother reaching for because you already know it won't work. And the interesting thing, the genuinely useful thing that Roko's basilisk accidentally demonstrates is that you can become aware of this. You can notice the beliefs that are running in the background, not to eliminate them all, which is neither possible nor desirable, but to hold them a little more lightly, to see them as beliefs rather than facts, to ask occasionally whether this particular background assumption is serving you or merely persisting out of habit. The basilisk harms by being known. Some beliefs harm the same way, by being assumed, by running unexamined, by shaping everything without ever being looked at directly. And the antidote to both is the same: attention. Clear, gentle, unhurried attention to what is actually in your mind. I want to return near the end of tonight to the experience machine, because there is a version of it that is not hypothetical. We live already inside partial experience machines, feeds designed by algorithms that have studied what keeps your attention and learned to provide it in carefully calibrated doses. Entertainment that offers the emotional experience of adventure and connection and triumph without the cost and risk of the real thing. The ability to present online a version of yourself edited and curated and optimized in ways the actual you never quite manages. None of this is purely bad. Stories have always been experience machines of a kind. Films and novels offer us the experience of lives we haven't lived, emotions we haven't felt, perspectives we haven't occupied. This is valuable. It is one of the things that makes us human. But Nozick's question remains: at what point does a simulation replace the thing it simulates? At what point does the experience of connection replace actual connection? The feeling of meaning replace actual meaning? The image of a life replace the life? This is not a question with a clean answer. The line is not obvious. People draw it differently and reasonably disagree about where it falls. But the question itself is worth carrying. Of other people, the possibility of other people, the possibility of failure turns out to be, in part, what makes the wanting worth anything. You cannot have the real version of things without their realness, and realness includes resistance. So what actually matters? I don't think philosophy can answer this for you. I don't think it should try. But I think it can clear some ground. It can show you that the life of pure comfort, pure pleasure, pure frictionless experience, the experience machine life, is not what most people actually want when they think carefully about what they want. It can show you that morality is not a fixed code to be obeyed, but a living project to be engaged with, one that requires your participation, your honest feeling, your willingness to be wrong and to keep asking. It can show you that the beliefs running in the background of your mind are doing something, and that noticing them is a form of freedom available to you right now, in this moment, without any special equipment. It can show you that what you do matters, not because the universe is keeping score, but because you are here, in contact with what is real, in relationship with actual other people who are actually there, in a life that is genuinely yours and not a simulation of someone else's. And it can suggest, quietly, that the questions themselves, the ones that arrive uninvited at 3 a.m, the ones that make the familiar suddenly strange, the ones we've been sitting with all evening, that those questions are not a malfunction. They are a sign that something in you is still alive to the strangeness of being here at all. Still curious, still reaching, still in the most fundamental sense, awake. Here we are, at the end of a long evening with some of the strangest and most persistent questions human beings have ever asked. We began with the fact of consciousness, the inexplicable, irreducible, still unexplained reality that there is someone home, that you are not a philosophical zombie, that the lights are on and experience is happening, and that this fact, held in the right light, is quietly extraordinary. We moved into the nature of reality, Berkeley's perception, Descartes' certainty, the solipsism that makes the choice to believe in other people look like something heroic, the Boltzmann brain that shows experience has its own authority, Hume's problem of induction that reveals how much of what we call knowledge is actually trust. We sat with freedom, Libet's readiness potential, the marshmallow children whose choices were shaped by whether their world kept its promises, the gap between impulse and action, where something real lives, the quantum branch where you, of all the possibilities, continued. And we ended here, with the experience machine that most people refuse, the morality that is a living project rather than a fixed code, the beliefs running in the background that shape everything, the question of what actually matters, and the recognition that the question itself is a kind of answer. What runs through all of it is the same thread: attention, the willingness to look directly at things, at your own experience, at the assumptions underneath your assumptions, at the beliefs you've been carrying without examining, at the strangeness of the ordinary when you hold it still long enough to see it clearly. Attention is not anxiety. It is almost the opposite of anxiety. Anxiety is the mind running from the thing it's afraid to look at. Attention is the mind turning toward it, calmly, with genuine curiosity, without needing it to be different from what it is. The philosophers we've spent time with tonight, all of them, in their different ways, were practicing attention, looking at things other people walked past, asking questions other people thought weren't worth asking, sitting with discomfort until it became interesting rather than threatening. And what they found, more often than not, was not despair, was wonder. If you have been here all the way to this moment, if you traveled from consciousness through reality, through freedom, through meaning, and arrived at this quiet place, still listening, then something in tonight was for you. And if it was, I want to ask you something small. Leave a like if you can. It is a small signal sent forward, a way of telling the world that slow and careful and genuinely curious is something worth finding. That philosophy doesn't have to be intimidating. That the biggest questions can be held gently, in the dark, on an ordinary evening, and become something restful rather than something frightening. Each like helps other people, other minds lying awake, other people who feel the 2 a.m. strangeness of their own existence find their way here. And if soothing science has become part of how you end your days, if these journeys into this strange and beautiful territory of ideas have given you something to rest inside, subscribe if you haven't yet, so the next journey is there when you need it, so we can keep asking together. This is a space for people who find wonder restful, who know that a genuinely good question held in the right way is better company than an easy answer, who understand that not knowing can be peaceful if you're not afraid of it. If that is you, you have always belonged here. And now, there is nothing left to resolve. The hard problem of consciousness is still hard. Reality is still mysterious. The gap between impulse and action is still available to you. The experience machine is still a choice you get to keep making every day. The moral conversation is still ongoing and still needs your voice. None of it requires anything from you right now. Right now, the only thing being asked of you is to rest. Let your breathing slow to something that doesn't need to be managed. Let the questions we've been holding tonight become something softer, not problems to be solved, but companions to be carried lightly. The way you carry something interesting in your pocket, not because you need it right now, but because it's good to have. Let the day, everything it asked of you, everything it took, every decision you made from habit, or from fear, or from genuine choice, let it settle into the past, where it lives now. You were aware today. You noticed things. You asked at least once something real. That is enough. That is, in fact, everything. The philosopher in you can rest now. The consciousness that has been here all evening, inexplicable, irreducible, still not fully understood by anyone, can soften into the particular quiet of this hour. You are here, aware, real in whatever sense things are real. And the world, in this particular branch of all the possible worlds, continues gently with you in it. Good night, sleep well, and I will see you next time, wherever our curiosity takes us.